All right, hey everybody, we are back. We've now got Tesla's delivery report, production report for Q3. They have released the numbers here finally this morning, and they are a little bit lower than what I had expected, unfortunately, but it does look like well ahead of analyst consensus. So remember, the analyst consensus was around 222,000 deliveries. Tesla reporting 241,300 deliveries in total, about 9,275 Model S and X, obviously primarily Model S, and 232,025 Model 3 and Model Y. As for production, this is where I'm a little bit disappointed. Obviously, I had expected 251,000. Tesla coming in quite a bit lower there, with 8,941 Model S and X, obviously just Model S there, and 228,822 Model 3 and Y. So total 237,823, so 238,000 roughly production. But yeah, really strong delivery number. That's great for how Q3 earnings are going to shape up. I think the street will be pretty happy with the numbers. The street tends to care a little bit more about deliveries than production, like I do. So we'll see how the Wall Street, how the street reacts on Monday. The other thing that Tesla did say here is that we would like to thank our customers for their patience as we work through global supply chain and logistics issues. So obviously, Tesla doing the best that they can to work through any supply chain challenges that seem to be happening globally in the automotive business. And it sounds like they're kind of hinting at that having a pretty significant impact this quarter. So let's hop back into Excel and just try to make sense of kind of what these numbers might look like here. Flip over here. All right, so we do have to take down this number. So I'm guessing that Shanghai came in probably closer to that 45,000 mark that we had originally kind of expected based on, that rumored 300,000 vehicles being produced in year to date on September 29th. Obviously, that event never seemed to happen, but I'm guessing that was probably more in line with what we saw in production for Shanghai. So maybe we get 45,000 or so there. At this point, we just have to estimate until we do get that final production number out of Shanghai. And then if we assume that Fremont is the balance, so this would be 237, 840 or whatever they said, 823. Minus what we did from Shanghai. So Fremont may be coming in then 114,000-ish. So this is really where I think the miss is happening from what I had forecast. As you can tell, there's not much of an increase here in production in Fremont from what we had seen last quarter, assuming that our numbers in Shanghai here are right. And I think, if anything, they're probably low. I'd be pretty surprised if they didn't exceed that 44,000. Especially since we had the rumor of 52,000 domestic sales in China in September. So if we get 114,000 there, if we hop over here to like Model S and Model X, there was definitely a significant chunk of it from what I had expected. So I had about 13,000 Model S and X, and it looks like production was 8941. So we can lock that in as finalized now. And then we've got the balance here, so let's assume maybe 53,000-ish Model S. And then we've got that, minus that, minus that. So it looks like, yeah, overall, I mean, Model 3 and Model Y production declined quarter over quarter, or basically held steady. So in Q2 from Fremont, we've got 105,800, and in Q3 we've got 105,300. So definitely Model 3 and Y production took a small hit, and especially considering that we do have that extra day in Q3 versus Q2, the daily production rate there in Fremont is going to be quite a bit lower. So yeah, we got 105, 326 divided by 92. So daily production rate on the 3 and the Y was around 1,145 vehicles in Q3. versus in Q2, we've got that 105,830 divided by just 91 days. So we go from 1,163 per day in Q2 down to 1,145 per day in Q3. And obviously I was forecasting a continued increase based on what we've seen in previous quarters, but my guess is just with the amount of supply chain challenges there have been, obviously Elon back in, I suppose that would have been end of July. Elon spent a lot of time talking about all those types of challenges on that call. So, in terms of what my forecast here was versus the actuals, I think there's just a difference between, how much the supply chain was impacted versus what I was forecasting. So kind of a good news, bad news situation. Bad news is Q3 production wasn't quite up to what I had hoped. Good news, still well ahead of expectations, I think. So definitely excited with that. And secondarily, good news is that I think there's a lot more potential here when supply chain issues do get resolved. So I think 251,000, that was a very reasonable number that Tesla could have achieved if there had not been these issues. And you can kind of see that because, they certainly could have done a couple thousand more out of Fremont with Model 3 and the Model Y just based on past production rates. And then I had an additional, 3,500 from Model S. So once those continue to get ramped up, once supply chain issues alleviate a little bit, the capacity is there for Tesla to hit that. So it's exciting. I don't want to express too much disappointment with the numbers because the numbers are great. Obviously, I'm disappointed that they're not at my forecast, but relative to expectations, I think these should be definitely viewed as a success. And then if we look at deliveries, we've got pretty good numbers there, obviously, too. So let me unfreeze this frame so we can just take a look at deliveries. And then we'll take a quick look at Q4 too, and just see how this might shake out for Q4. So here we've got, let's see, 241,300. Let me just change this. So change in inventory, just so that's clear. And so Tesla did draw down their inventory by, reverse that, 3,500 vehicles or so. So it definitely swung the other way, which makes my forecast for deliveries look better than it was. If my inventory drawdown forecast had been correct, or inventory increasing forecast had been correct, then I would have, based on this production estimate, been around like 233,000 deliveries. So that did swing deliveries closer to what I had, but obviously don't deserve any credit for that. Just because it's really just a function of inventory. And that's why I say I don't care too much about the delivery number, just really production. But anyway, 241,000, again, that's about 20,000 ahead of consensus. As we talked about earlier this morning and yesterday, I think consensus has probably creeped up to 230,000-ish, maybe even a little bit higher than that. So we're definitely seeing a beat here, a pretty solid beat in terms of deliveries, and people are going to put that into their earnings forecasts. And I think we're going to see a lot of revisions upward from that number. Unfortunately, I do think the production number is going to hold down any increased estimates for Q4 right away. If Tesla had come in with higher production, I think they would have had to increase Q4. I think now they can, hold off on that and justify their current estimates, talking analysts here, based on just projecting continued supply chain challenges. So it makes things easier for them to not have to revise upward that lower production number. Still, though, they'll revise up their Q3 numbers. So how much of an impact that makes, TBD, may not matter all that much. So anyway, very happy with the delivery number. Production still pretty good. Let's take a look at Q4, how this might shake out. Obviously, we're going to have to lower some of the aggressive numbers that we went through this morning, but I think we left off with our conservative sort of assumptions in here. So for the year, Tesla's now produced 625,000 vehicles, about 400 short of that. Call it 625,000. They've delivered 628,000. If we look at, the inventory, remember it was around 24,000 vehicles before. That's going to now drop to, 21,000 or so. We can quick calc days of supply here, and then we'll get into the Q4 stuff, but just kind of curious on days of supply. So 237,823 divided by 75. 1 day of supply for Tesla is equivalent to 3,171 vehicles. And we know they've got about 21,000-ish in inventory, divided by 3107, I think that's what I said. So they're sitting on about a week of inventory, about 7 days, actually even a little bit less than that potentially. So inventory is really low. And as we head into Q4, we'll have to remember that inventory is low because they're just not they don't have a lot of stock then to be able to draw down. So in Q4, and Elon has also talked about unwinding the wave in Q4, which would also cause deliveries to potentially lag production. And we've also got the potential EV tax credit stuff to consider too at that point in time. So anyway, building this into Q4 then, again, we kind of have hopefully our conservative assumptions here. We kind of have to go off of what we assume September was for Shanghai. But I think these sort of rates, 45,000-ish on average, should be pretty achievable for Tesla. Supply chain issues obviously could affect it, but I think it's a pretty reasonable assumption there. Hopefully on the conservative side, I think there's probably upside to that, but that would get Tesla to 134,000 for Q4 from Shanghai. And then the 115,000 that we had in there, I still think that's probably a bit conservative. It's pretty much continuing the rates that they were at in Q3. Probably a fair place to leave it for now, but let's just look at how that makes the year look then. So this would put us at 800, the numbers in here would put us at 883,500 produced for the year, which I think consensus right now is around like 855,000 deliveries. So this would still be, and I think we're still pretty conservative here, I think this would still put production quite a bit ahead of what Wall Street's expecting at this point in time. So that's a good thing. And again, I think there's probably upside here, at least in Shanghai, and hopefully things get better in the supply chain. And Tesla can really start cranking out more vehicles out of Fremont, which certainly seems to have more capacity. Remember, Tesla lists their installed capacity in Fremont at 100,000 for Model S and X. Obviously, the X not ramped up yet, and then 500,000 for Model 3 and Model Y. Versus this quarter, 105,000, it's 420,000 a year. Tesla's not necessarily ever going to get to their full installed capacity, so 125,000 in a quarter, but certainly it seems like they should have a little bit more headroom to increase Model 3 and Y production if they've got the parts that they need. So anyway, I think we're still looking good. 900,000 is probably looking a little bit less likely. I don't think it's fully off the table. I think 120,000 out of Fremont certainly could be possible in Q4, especially when we get the Model X folded in there. Hopefully Model S continues to ramp as well, because they were pretty significantly below, 680 per week, which we know they're trying to get Model S up to the 1,000 to 1,200 range. So there should be plenty of room to ramp up Model S still. Should fold in the Model X numbers, and there should be more capacity for 3 and Y. I don't think 120,000 is crazy, and there should be some upside beyond that. Maybe they can get to 125,000. And then, as we talked about Shanghai, probably a week of downtime there early October. There's a China holiday at that point. And then we'll see, I don't know if we've got Q4 up here from last year. It looks like the numbers last year, Tesla was pretty much going full blast all of Q4. You can see they went from 37,000 in Q3 2020, all the way up to 67,000 in Q4. So a huge spike, consistent runtime last year through Q4. So we might have a week of downtime there in October, but then no reason to expect diminished production in November and October. So if I'm going to actually think about what I think is likely, probably a number more like this, maybe 144,000. Yeah, so again, supply chain, who knows? Obviously that messed us up this quarter, but if things are good, this would still put 904,000 vehicles produced on the table. So I don't think that's out of the realm of possibility. I think deliveries, that's probably a stretch, but yeah, I think 900,000, 880 to 900,000, even before figuring out Berlin and Texas is probably the range that I would, loosely throw out there for now, for full year. All right, so I think that's most of what we had to go through. I'll just pop into the chat and see if we got any major burning questions here. And yeah, just let me know what you guys think of the numbers too. I mean, I think like 2 weeks ago, we all would have been very happy with these numbers. And that's part of the downside of, releasing forecasts and things. Inevitably you're going to miss in one direction. If you miss on the high end, people are going to be a little bit disappointed. If you miss on the low end, obviously people will be excited, but that's not what the forecasts are about. It's not about trying to just be conservative for the sake of, reactions. It's just trying to walk through the logic, trying to understand, the context of these numbers that we have, which I think it really does help us understand what's going on here. And as we look ahead to Q4, again, that we already know that we're constrained there in Fremont with pretty high level of certainty from a supply chain perspective. They should have plenty of room to ramp that up. So we'll see. As for the Q3 earnings, so as I said earlier, those should happen on the 25th, Monday the 25th of October. And I'm super excited. 241,000, that's great. Like, that's an extremely good number. Again, consensus 222. So, and let's see. So quarter over quarter, let's talk about that quick. I don't think we discussed that. Quarter over quarter, then deliveries are up 20%, which is a bigger increase than what Tesla had seen in Q2 to Q3. And obviously we know the Q2 earnings were just phenomenal. So yeah, the sequential increase that we saw in Q2 to Q1, it was, 16,000 vehicles here, a 9% increase. And now from Q2 to Q3, we've got 40,000 more vehicles and a 20% increase. So again, even though we missed my forecast here, these are not disappointing numbers. These are still very, very strong numbers that really deserve to be recognized as such. And I mean, adding 40,000 vehicles in a single quarter, when we just heard yesterday from GM that, their inventory is down 80%, 85% or whatever from sort of normal levels. Their US sales were down 30%. It's a challenging time in the environmental or in the automotive environment right now. So for Tesla to be able to grow production under those sort of under that context is just a really impressive number. So yeah, definitely don't want to express any disappointment with that. As for production, obviously there's just, we had the inventory flipping in terms of the impact. Q1 they built Q2 they built inventory. Q3 they drained inventory. So that aids to the spreads that we're seeing here. But even production up 15% quarter over quarter. From a total perspective, looks like Shanghai probably up about 26%. And yeah, year over year, which are actually now starting to be relevant, Tesla up 64%. And I know this looks like it might be Q4, but that is actually the Q3 numbers there. So up 64% year over year. That's a great accomplishment again in this type of environment. So let's see, we did inventory, we did deliveries, we did sequential growth, year over year growth. I guess we didn't do deliveries year over year, so let's take a look at that quick. So Q3 versus Q3, it's gonna be a big one. Yeah, so deliveries up 73%. And again, last year Q3 was kind of when the effects of the pandemic were becoming more minimal. Obviously Q1 and Q2, there were significant amounts of production shutdowns. Q3 started to normalize and Q4 really built on that. But up 73% year over year for deliveries, obviously great to see. Let's see if there's any other fun stuff here. So 18,000 produced per week in total. Per day ends up at 2,500. And maybe something fun to look at here, I don't know if this will display correctly, but let's just give some extra context for what Tesla's doing these days. So 238,000 vehicles produced in the quarter. If we go back, and you can kind of see some of the history here, I don't know, what, maybe 2018? Yeah, 2018, Tesla produced 254,000 vehicles in the entire year. So what, 3 years later now, we're eclipsing that in a single quarter. Not eclipsing it, but getting very close to that in a single quarter. And that was after the Model 3 ramped up. For even more perspective, you go back a year, 2017, Tesla produced 100,000 vehicles. So less than 5 years later, they're more than doubling that production, which doubling in 5 years is honestly not too bad. It's actually a pretty good result in and of itself, but not only are they doubling, they're actually 2.3 times as many deliveries or as many vehicles produced, and it's happening in a single quarter instead of a year. So pretty impressive to think about that context from where we were just a few short years ago. All right, so I think I did see one super chat. Let's just make sure I get to that. Hadisha, thank you, appreciate that. And yeah, guys, I do apologize for the live stream this morning that we didn't get the delivery numbers, but all's well now. We got them, and I think that's probably all there is to say about them at this point. So appreciate you guys for tuning in. Again, hopefully the forecast that we went through helps add a little bit of context, helps us understand these numbers. And yeah, I think just probably the last thing to reiterate here is I flip back to Tesla's report. Again, we would like to thank our customers for their patience as we work through global supply chain and logistics challenges. That's not the norm for Tesla. Like, let's go back to Q3 last year, and you can see Q3 last year, just straight up, here's what we produced, here's what we delivered. No additional line in there to talk about any supply chain challenges or anything like that. And even then, they were, coming out of the pandemic. So, or coming out of the production impacts from the pandemic. Q4, nothing about supply chain challenges. Q1, yeah, talking about Model S and X, early stage of the ramp. And then Q2, our teams have done an outstanding job navigating through global supply chain and logistics challenges. And then here you've got slightly different language. We'd like to thank our customers for the patience as we work through. So it's like, oh, we did an outstanding job in Q2, and now we're thanking customers and everyone for their patience. So it's just a different tone, and stuff like that matters, especially with Tesla. Like the little language that they use is often very telling. So I just think that's important to reiterate. And I'm sure we'll hear a lot more about that on the earnings call in about 3.5 weeks. All right. So with that, I'll let you guys all get back to your Saturday. I'll get back to my Saturday. Again, subscribe. We'll have that FSD beta video coming out tomorrow. That's looking really good. So stay tuned for that. Yeah, and if you do want to just catch that quick question and answer, lots of cues there. If you do want to catch that quick question and answer that we did this morning, some interesting topics came up, so I'll leave that live on the channel too for anyone that wants to do that. And for the audio podcast, I'm just going to throw them all into the same episode. But yeah, until tomorrow, I hope you guys have a good rest of your day. Hopefully everyone's pleased with the numbers. And yeah, we'll see you soon. Thanks.